Hey everybody,
Hello.
Leon and Aaron here, back at it with another video. So in this video, we're going to cover our closet, our U-bench for our dinette, as well as the drawer and step that belong to it. So stay tuned.
Let's do it.
We have a little bit of dead space right here next to our shower behind the driver's seat. So we're going to build a little something right here. So stay tuned. Alright, as you know, in a van, there's very limited space, so you want to try to maximize everything. So we're going to be building a little cabinet here. We're going to hope to hang some stuff and potentially have a little footrest. So when princesses are swiveling, they could kick their feet up probably in this area. So that means we'll have some sort of removable box at this bottom kind of quarter of here, and then the top, it'll just be like a little cabinet. Put a little pole here and hang some clothes. So I took a bunch of measurements already. I did cut this siding. I wanted it to be lower than our foam blob. We're still not really sure what we're gonna do with this, but I made some measurements, cut this piece of wood, followed the contour of our wall, and then tried to perfect my seat where I could still recline comfortably and then obviously still drive fully functional. So I did cut this piece already. I made a little shim down there, basically just to give me the exact spacing that I think I'll need, which came out to 9.5 inches. So that means we'll have about 9.5 inches by around 50 inches of usable space. So I'm gonna design a little something and then we'll walk through it. Back to the real world, enjoying golden hour here in Southern California. So I got all of our pieces cut out and pocket holed and sanded so we could take a little look at how that design kind of turned to the real life. So these two larger pieces are our sidings. They have the pocket holes in them. Usually you pocket hole your front and backs, because generally in the back you're not going to see it, and then in the front it's usually covered by a drawer front or some sort of framing. But since we wanted our maximum area here, we pocket holed the sides and left the fronts clean. Alright, so you're just going to get a perfectly clean front here. So as you can see, I did my 1/2 inch gap here with a 1/4 inch dado. Then on the top where our opening in our little front, or not our front, but the lid is gonna sit, this is a bunch of cuts that make a 1/2 inch groove. So that way we can lift the top off the box and access whatever we want in there, any good storage, and then yeah, so we can pretty much assemble this at this point. And then on the lid, I'm gonna have to cut a little hole in it so I could lift up the lid if we need to. I know that probably didn't make too much sense, but I'm gonna assemble this and then hopefully it does. So let's jump to it. All right, so it's built. Hopefully that helps clear things up, but it looks pretty good. So I'm gonna ship this off to our QA department. They're gonna test it out. That's a big boy.
I'll take a nap now.
No. Still got work to do. You're also finishing department.
No, but
Shellac Baja. So the thing,
this is gonna be nice.
this thing's super sturdy. I'm actually just super happy with how it came out. But I could probably stand on it. Should I try standing on it?
Oh no. You're gonna hit your head or something.
No. That's sturdy. It's got lots of purposes. serves as the footrest, obviously. Lots of good storage in there too. And then if we tuck it up against our dinette and close off the hallway, that could fit a 6th person. So we could have a huge party in here.
Party of 6.
So.
And Bailey's a 7.
Aww. Next up on our to-do list is this little thing that we're calling the step. So the step is basically just a raised platform in between our 2 benches, and what that's primarily doing is it's making us have a comfortable height between where our, I guess, butts are sitting and the space down to our legs and our feet. So we did a little research. We saw that that kind of leg height is most comfortable between, say, 15 and 20 inches. So since our bench by itself without the cushions is 24 inches tall, and then we add, say, a 4-inch foam mattress, but say that only compresses 50%, that adds an additional 2 inches. So 26 inches is kind of what we're working with right now. So we're targeting to make like an 8-inch high final height bench, which should give us around 18 inches of leg height. So with that 8-inch platform, that's going to give us a lot of storage underneath it. So our plan is to use some heavy duty full extension drawer slides to basically be able to slide out this huge drawer the size or the length of our bench. So that's around 53 inches. And what that's going to allow us to do is basically just fit things that you typically wouldn't be able to fit anywhere else. So generally longer items, they could be like camping chairs, they could be fishing rods, like maybe a rug. So that's going to give us a lot of opportunity to store those larger items there. So I've already done some of the cutting, but one of the issues that we ran into was that our benches aren't perfectly parallel with each other. Actually, this right bench, the electrical side, tapers kind of towards me. So what happens is that since the van more towards the center is the largest part and the van wall kind of tapers this way, when I tucked the bench against that, it also made the bench kind of come out this way. So that means that this side, this width, is actually a little bit shorter than that side by, I think my measurements were around 1/4 to 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8 inch. So with the slides, they're pretty finicky if you don't have a perfectly parallel, or yeah, perfectly parallel, you know, slides. So my plan is to basically shim out this right side a little bit so that when it does come to sliding it out, there's no friction and it glides nice and easily. So for our bench, we're using some of our kind of leftover pieces just because I didn't want to have to buy more. But this top surface will be covered with our flooring, which will look nice. And then basically we're going to be making it out of 3/4 inch plywood, and that's because we wanted this to be nice and rigid. We're going to be stepping on it a lot, and we don't want it to be kind of rattling around or trampoline-y. So 3/4 inch for that. And then as far as the supporting structures underneath it, which kind of form like the cabinet area, if you will, we're going to be using these 1/2 inch pieces of plywood to support our steps. So since there's only supports on kind of the perimeter, since we want the drawers to slide out, this is kind of what we came up with. So I am having to cut little extra bits just because some of the wood lengths that we had didn't fit exactly how we needed them to. So, and also since plywood typically comes in 4x8 lengths, you know, you might consider just building things at 48 and no longer than that. We ran into this issue a lot where, for example, our benches are 53 inches, and then our galley cabinet is also 53 inches. So a lot of pieces of wood you kind of can't work with unless you somehow are like butt joining them to make them the appropriate length, because they only come in 48 inches. So that might be your lessons learned there. So one consideration when you're building this middle platform, specifically in a Ford Transit, I'm not sure about other vans, but the spare tire access hole is located right here. So in our case, we could fit pretty much everything except for the face frame. It just so happens that our kind of fronts of our cabinet would end up overlapping just a tad on this access hole. So it's not enough room for us to stick that little included lug wrench kind of situation in there. However, our plan is to make it easy enough to access it even though we're covering it. So for us, we're gonna make our face frame, or the little, I guess the door front, flip up. That way, since that's what's actually blocking the hole, we should still be able to access it, maybe at a slight angle. And then as far as this little U piece of the bench, our plan is to make that kind of modular so that in the event that we needed to do that, we could potentially just slide it forward just a tad. Okay, so I've made some adjustments to our bench top, and we also got our hinges in. So right now I had to cut basically this length here because we wouldn't be able to hinge this side open because of the D-pillar and because of this little wall bit. So I'm just gonna cut that, and then I did cut it, and then I'm just gonna screw it in. Worst comes to worst, I can unscrew it to access things, but for the most part, I should be able to access anything I need through the side like this. But the hinges that we got, I would have loved for them to be concealed, that way we don't need to see them, but I couldn't find concealed hinges that kind of extend past 90, so we are able to extend past 90 just because we have this little bump out here. So this way, we don't necessarily need to use a gas strut to hold it up because it will be able to go so far back that it can just lean back. So right now, my plan is to trim this a little bit. So like I mentioned, our bench is square, but it's plumb with the wall of the van, which is kind of curving or at least slanted overall towards the back. So I will need to take out my circular saw and trim across this line, which I basically drew by putting the bench in place and then taking a pencil and then following this all the way across, marking the inside of the bench. So we're gonna cut this out. So the water side follows a similar concept, but the only difference is that we had to cut out this little sliver. It's about 2 inches, and that's because if we tried to hinge this entire length here, we would conflict with our switches and stuff. So I basically had to chop this out. This will be fixed, and then the center partition will be what hinges. Then of course on this side, same concept as the other side, where we are basically just making this fixed, and we'll unscrew it if we need to access it. I've got a new setup for little Bailey. She gets our little playpen out here, surrounded by power tools. What you doing?
Give it a little mix.
So, we bought a quart. Thought that would be enough. It wasn't. We bought a gallon.
Thought that would be enough, and it wasn't, so this is our next gallon.
So we're going through 2 1/4 gallons so far. That's what we purchased. But
yeah, we didn't realize we were painting so much,
so hopefully this is our last one, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So Liana's got some paint going. She's gonna be painting our bench tops, which are nice. And then those 3 pieces over there are for our cabinet under the sink. So while she's doing that, I don't know how well you're gonna be able to see any of this, but our step is now shellacked. I'm honestly not really sure why these ones turned out so much more yellow than that one. It could be because I only put 1 coat on that versus 2 on these. But I did have to beef up that back area because that's gonna be the place with the most weight on it, and it's gonna be highly trafficked. So when you consider taking a step onto this, you're putting all of your weight onto basically 1 focal point of your foot. So I did add in this little 3/4 inch run so that our platform can sit on top of that. So we're looking good. Right now, my plan is to just get these screwed in, and then from there, once we get our slides in, that's what I'll be shimming against these backs. So stay tuned. So that little closet is gonna be situated right here. So Liana is painting this outside face of the shower. She's enjoying it. Very ergonomic, good posture, good form. Eyes on the prize. Can I get a woo-woo?
Woo-woo.
She doesn't want to turn around because she's got a grumpy face probably. Okay, so our drawer sides came in, and now I'm doing a little bit of test fitting, but overall I don't think I'm going to need to shim this side as I was expecting, even though there's a little bit of a gap. So I think our gap ends up being less than 1/4 inch. So I did try to put a 1/4 inch piece of plywood back there, but it binded even worse than it did without it. So I think that that means that our gap, or I guess the difference in terms of parallel, is less than 1/4 inch. And I think drawer slides need about 1/8 inch of tolerance. So we kind of just make it work like this. And as far as sliding it out, it's pretty smooth without the shims. So I've tacked the back down of the rails, and then I cut these two pieces as a mock drawer box. So it locks into place nicely. There we go. And then as far as measuring parallel, it might be a little bit not parallel, so it might come out slightly this way. But I did try to do some measurements. So I basically measured from this reflector to our handle, and then same thing from this reflector on this handle. And there's only about 1/4 inch distance, so it is coming out this way, but it's so minor, like probably however many degrees of difference that is. It's so minor that I don't think I'm going to mess with it. So it's also hard to tell because, you know, who knows, there could be slight differences and variations in how the drawers are sitting. So it could be a manufacturer difference or just the fact that we're sitting on a slight slope. But visibly, it looks like it's pretty parallel. So we're just going to keep it like that. Then one other issue that we're going to encounter as we do this, since our handles, or these little knobs, we want to hide them and not have to make a cutout in the drawer fronts. So we want to sit this back behind where our flip-up door would be. So we're gonna have a little flip-up door, right? Okay, so because of that, since we are pushing this back about, 1 1/4 inch, to actually screw into the drawers, at least for the rear half of the drawer box, you have to use this little access hole to screw into that inner rail. So that might cause issues for us, so I'm gonna kind of have to think about how we install this. I might actually need to just do pilot holes on our sidings, and then we'll actually have to install the rails onto the box first and kind of hold everything down in place while we install that assembly to our sidings. So we'll see. Okay, we just resupplied on plywood, and I think that that might be our last trip to the lumberyard. We'll see, but I'm sad because I really like going to that lumberyard. There was lots of fun stuff there, and it always smelled nice. But I'm happy because it also means that we're finishing the van. So at this point, I've already cut some of the pieces down, and we can take a look here. So conceptually, what we're doing is we're using a 1/4 inch bottom. So this was probably the biggest debate for me because this is such a big drawer. So I wanted it to be sturdy, so this is where the 3/4 inch sidings come in. But the 1/4 inch bottom, I wanted to make sure it was strong enough while also maximizing the space underneath. So I could have done a 1/2 inch board, either screwed into the bottom or dadoed in, but I went with 1/4 inch just to save on a little bit of weight. So I did cut a 1/4 inch dado across our boards, a 1/2 inch from the bottom. So, and it's also, what is this, 3/8 inch deep, because that's half of our 3/4 inch plywood. So with that dado there, we could use our 1/4 inch board across, and then we could also support it from the bottom with these 1/2 inch plywood pieces every, maybe 16 inches or so. So the challenge with a drawer this big is that, obviously it's big and it needs to support a lot of weight, but when you have something flexible like 1/4 inch, if you add weight to it or whatever, there's potential that it could kind of bend out of place and essentially escape from your groove. So to prevent that, we're using these, and that'll help support everything. Aside from that, there is a little 1/4 inch dado at the top. So this drawer will not only be storage, but it'll serve as another countertop. That way when we extend it out, we could set up some picnic tables or picnic chairs and just post up, have a White Claw. So that's kind of what our overall situation here is. But I think this is probably the best weight to performance ratio that I could think through. We decided to build it before we paint it, so I did put it together and it feels very sturdy. It's actually super solid. So I'm happy with how it came out, and yeah, here's the underside of it just so you can see what the finished product looks like. Just checking fitment, and it fits perfectly. So I'm very happy that it fits. When I did the toilet slide out, I didn't make it as precise as this, so this feels good, and it means hopefully that my woodworking skills has gotten a little bit better. Liana is back at it again.
Again.
Again and
Another
again.
painting day for like the 25th time. I'm over it.
You like sanding still?
No. I don't like anything. Are we done yet? Can we leave?
You could paint it popsicle blue.
Don't drip that anywhere.
Excuse the mess, but I know I mentioned that I would install the rails to the drawer box first, but I ended up just installing the rails first because it turns out that I'm still able to access the screws that would screw into your drawer box through this little area. So there's just barely enough clearance there, but I can get my driver in there. For mounting these, I did pick up some number 12 pan heads. These are some big chonkers, but I would say instead of pan heads, you should just go with the flat heads, you know, the kind of conical situations, because in some of these screw locations, there's just barely enough clearance for a pan head, so I ended up having to switch them out with number 10 flat heads just because I didn't want a little bit of rubbing. So that rubbing basically resulted in some kind of like friction and stopping points with the rail, but with the flat heads it all glides really smoothly. Check it out, everybody. We got the drawer installed and it locks into place. I used a bunch of 3/4 inch flat heads, number 10s, just all along the rail to mount it to our box. And then as you can see, I also added our kind of tabletop here. So I did drill out little holes so we could stick our finger in, pop it open, and then get access to all the goodies inside. But I think at this point, we're going to stain the top and then varnish it. So for these we stained and then used some sort of top coat. These ones we're going to varnish just to make sure it's nice and kind of sturdy and can hold up to like drinks and whatever sweating. So one of the things that I need to do is trim this down just a little bit, because as we add those coats of all that stuff, it's going to widen a little bit and potentially make it too difficult to open these. As it is already, it's kind of a perfect fit, so there's a little bit of friction opening it and closing it. But pretty successful day. So, and then finishing department still needs to go in, and I think we're shellacking the inside. Now we're ready to install this little board on top of our step area. Okay, so we're just going to be using a nail gun to tack down our platform to the supports. Obviously the supports are what's holding the weight, but the brads are just there to hold this from shifting around. So we thought this was the easier solution as opposed to screws, just because with screws we're going to be putting vinyl flooring over here, so we would have to probably countersink all the screws, then patch it, and then roll out the vinyl. And if we ever needed to maintain something under here, both of them would be destructive in the sense that, you know, the vinyl would have to be torn up, or the screws would have to be unscrewed, or the nails would have to be pulled out. So overall, I think this is going to be the easiest solution. While perhaps not the prettiest, it's going to work just fine. Just finished nailing everything down, and since we have a little bit of gaps, for example this guy right here, which is about 1/8 to 3/16 inch, I'm going to fill it with a little bit of elastomeric compound. So this is what we used for our ceiling. So as we had, I think, 3 pieces of plywood on the ceiling, we wanted to smooth out some of the gaps that occurred at the top. So I'm going to do that for all of these edges here, and the primary purpose of that is so that when we use the vinyl adhesive and stick our vinyl onto here, we don't get drips down the side. So that's kind of the primary purpose, and then I guess of course you don't really want a gap in your vinyl. It might not look as professional. So we're just gonna go around and putty this. And if you haven't seen our ceiling video, this stuff is paintable but not sandable. I think you can technically get away with a little sanding, but it doesn't specifically say that you can sand it. The elastomeric compound is applied, so just like caulking. I'm actually impressed with how well I did this, because usually whenever I caulk stuff it turns out pretty bad and messy. But as you can see, I also did add a little bit of wood filler to our transition here. So our riser was a little bit taller than our platform, probably by like a 32nd of an inch. So I just wanted to kind of smooth that out so that when we roll out our vinyl, which we have right here, it's less visible that there's a little hump there. But that probably doesn't matter because we're gonna have some sort of trim piece there covering that transition. So our vinyl flooring is the same, so we're using the same for our platform as we are with the floor, and we're excited to get this piece done with because we could finally get rid of this leftover vinyl. So this has been sitting in our little studio for the longest time, taking up space, and yeah, once we're done with it, I'm not sure what we're gonna do with it, but we'll probably throw it away or maybe somebody else wants it, so let us know. Got the flooring cut out, fit to size. Turned out pretty good. My trick was to use a guide, so don't try to basically fold this into the corner and then take your utility blade and cut along there. It doesn't work out, especially if you don't know what you're doing and you're not used to it. So I did use this piece of plywood as a guide, and then at least for this back edge I used this random piece of scrap that has grains kind of going perpendicular from the way that I'm cutting to follow that bottom edge. So the perpendicular grains are important because if they went with the grain, your blade would typically want to follow whichever direction your grain is going, which doesn't always end up being perpendicular to how you want your cut. So I think we're gonna try to glue this tonight. As you can see, it's getting kind of dark, but the benefit of doing this tonight is that it'll be dry in the morning, so I think we'll just do it real quick. Since we're in a little bit of a rush since it's getting dark, I'm not gonna record much of this, but we're basically gonna be using the same adhesive that we used in our flooring video. So if you wanna check that out, check out this link right here. But we're basically gonna be using this, spread it around, and then let the vinyl down. So check out the video if you want to see it, because you're probably not going to see it now. Alright, so last night I was able to finish the vinyl flooring just in the nick of time. It's probably still drying a little bit, but I can step on it at this point. So right now I have some of our bench pieces test fit. I also started pocket holing them just to make sure that everything kind of lines up perfectly before I do screw it in. And since we are having a door that flips up from the inside and then a door that flips out towards the back, I did add this little support here. So this support is going to be screwed in first. I am using this little card trick, basically just using these as little shims to measure how big of a gap that I need. So I basically kept adding cards to each side until they're both even and tight. And then since my pocket holes are on the outside of these sidings, I did draw a line here once the gap was measured. So now I can slide out this whole little assembly and then screw it in while matching my marks. So let's do it. What'd you say?
I said I'm finally shellacking years later.
Years later.
Years later.
You missed a spot.
You mean missed? I'm still doing it.
Yeah, you missed this entire area.
Leave me alone.
Leave me alone. Leave Liana is hard at work sanding our drawer countertop. So these are the tops of the long 48-inch drawer that we have coming out of the rear of the van. That's kind of part of our step. But she's sanding them right now and doing some prep work, because our plan with these is to stain both sides, and then we're going to put a coat of oil-based polyurethane on top. So the reasoning behind the oil-based polyurethane is that we wanted it to stand up to something like a drink sweating, right? Any water or anything that gets onto it, we want it to be protected. And also because we expect that it's going to get a lot of kind of wear and tear, and we don't want to damage the stain. So that's going to be nice. And the stain is going to be a nice touch just because, you know, at the beginning of our build, we worked really hard on staining a lot of our upper cabinets, and then this kind of lower half is all covered with Baja, this beige color. So it'll have a nice kind of touch of stain right in this area, which is what she's sanding right now. Oh, and she did just finish shellacking the inside of this, so it's got a nice sheen to it. It's nice and protected, and it looks great. Actually, the grain on this wood's pretty gnarly. I'm not really sure what causes these different striations, so if anybody knows, feel free to let us know in the comments. Check it out, everybody. We got it all installed. Kind of ignore this top little flap for now and the tilt that you see, but this was our most important piece. This was the access door through the rear, and we have it on these soft close surface mount hinges just because we had a little extra, and then we also use these 40 Newton struts. So I had to use 2 of them. In fact, I started off with 20 pounds on each side. It was not enough to support the weight of this door. This door is 3/4 inch plywood. I believe the dimensions are 15 1/4 tall by 27 wide. So whatever that maths out to, it was not enough to support the door. So I did upgrade them to 40 Newtons. Luckily we had those lying around because I had purchased those originally for our upper cabinets, but they were too strong. So it turns out that 40 Newtons is perfect for this. I'm sure there's a math equation for this. I don't know what it is, but there's, you know, you got to calculate some sort of leverage or lever action going on. But the struts worked out nicely, and now we have access to our little cubby back here. And of course, there's our flooring that we worked so hard on overnight. So swinging around to the other side. So I got these, they call them bench hinges. So I like them because it's kind of an all-in-one. You don't need struts, and they're hinges themselves, of course. So they didn't come with any directions. So honestly, I've just been eyeballing what I think makes sense, and what I think makes sense didn't actually work out. So as you can see, I've drilled a bunch of holes trying to make slight adjustments, and nothing seems to work. But we're gonna figure it out. But in essential, oh, there's the stinker.
Hi.
But in an ideal world, all of these hinges would work. They do, but they also don't. And what's causing my issue, I think, is that I didn't leave enough gap in the back to allow the hinge to kind of open up, accounting for the 3/4 inch plywood. So I'm going to make some slight adjustments there, and then I also need to trim the lip wherever this overhangs to be flush or plumb with the siding. Once I figure out these hinges and then trim off the excess from this lip here, I'll be able to install these little rails. So these rails are going to be how we hold our converted table into bed mode. So whatever table that exists here will sit flush with the rest of our benches on top of these rails. So I already got them cut out and countersunk with all of my screw locations, and I think at this point we just need to paint those and they'll be ready to be installed. So that should make it all nice and pretty for our table to sit right here. The rails are painted now, and I'm just going to get it installed to the side of our bench So I have it clamped up basically with the exact gap that we're gonna need for our drop-down table. And luckily I had already done the laminate on this guy, because now I can see exactly how high it's gonna be. So I'm gonna get this pilot hole in and then screwed in all the way. Repeat the same process for the other side. Okay, made a boo-boo. The final height is supposed to line up with this, and at this point I've aligned it up with this. So I gotta patch all of these holes that I made in both benches, paint it, and then reapply the rail. Repairs have been made, and I got those rails installed as expected now. So as you can see, since we butted up our benches against the walls, which taper backwards a little bit, you'll notice that the gaps up front compared to the back are much smaller. So at this point that's expected. I did cut the table square because who wants to deal with a odd table? So I'm gonna leave it like that. I think I actually need to trim off maybe about 1/8 to 1/4 inch off the back here, or that side. And I think that little excess occurred because I do have a small gap back there for the hinges. So we'll make some cuts to this and then I think we should be all set. Oh, maybe I'll lie down. So I'm 5'8". Oh yeah, this plane. I could get used to this. You know, it's honestly pretty comfy. I mean, it'd be comfier with cushions, but it's coming together. Thanks to Liana's painting, we have assembled our cabinet and footrest. So I have my assistant here, gonna give us a little demonstration.
Alright, so we will have a rod in there so we can actually hang clothes. For now it's empty. So last touch there. And then we have our finished footrest / stool that slides out.
Kind of looks like a PC computer. Nice, let me step back.
Bailey. Bailey's like, it's my seat. Or it's a little gate for her. We can block her off into that section.
Our U-bench is finally together, and it came out really nicely. We have hinges on this side so we can access it from the rear, and we also have hinges on the inside so that we can access it from within the van. So I'm still working out how to perfect those bench seat hinges. Again, they didn't come with instructions, so I was kind of winging it, and of course winging it didn't exactly work out perfectly. But there's lots of storage in there for good stuff. And of course, we still have access to our spare tire here, so if we ever need to drop the spare tire, we can access it. It's not going to be the easiest way, but it's not going to be impossible to get our spare tire out. And of course, we got the large drawer down here, which gives us lots of good long storage for those items that we can't fit within the van somewhere else. Liana did a great job in turning this kind of cover as a countertop. So we could either sit on the rear of the van and post up, or we could pull out our camping chairs and picnic in the back. So one thing that I'm still trying to figure out is how we're going to hinge the front that belongs here. So originally I wanted to hide all of this kind of pocket holing and all that stuff behind the front. So we're looking for a hinge that can mount to this little piece of wood that we have here in angles above 90 so that we could still access these slides. So if you have any ideas for us, let us know. Stepping into the inside of the van, you can see our step. So we still need to paint it, and then we'll add a step edge trim, something that matches our front step. So we're gonna wait on that until we get everything solidified. And then of course, our U-bench. We're gonna close out the video there, so we hope you found it helpful. To summarize, we installed our U-bench, so that includes the storage in the rear, as well as the step with the large drawer underneath it, and then we also installed our closet with the footrest. So now we could hang some clothes in there, and also kick up our feet when we're swiveling.
Yep, it's really coming together. It's nice that now we can sit in here on the bench and hopefully move in soon. So, almost there.
We hope you found this video helpful. If you did, leave a like, helps us out a lot. If you have any questions for us or any advice, leave a comment. We're always happy to see what you guys think. And of course, if you want to follow along with the rest of our build and our journeys across the US and maybe some of the neighboring countries, subscribe.
We'll see you on the next one.